ready for some football, some Texans Today party.
Welcome into Texans Today, everybody. I'm your host, Jeremy Chuggs, and coming up on today's show, we are looking at the Texans versus Steelers injury reports. Now, as I'm filming this on Wednesday, January 7th, they have not practiced yet. The Texans are practicing Thursday, Friday, Saturday, leading up to that Monday night game. But we're going to take a look at some of the injuries on both sides that we should be looking out for on the injury reports. And then also, I'm going to be looking at some X factors on both teams and who could really be a main factor in this game to determine whether or not the Texans win or lose this one, and same with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Before we get going, if you haven't already, make sure to give me a follow on social media. I'm always posting around the Texans. I'm posting just my inner thoughts, my inner feelings. So if you want to be a part of that, if you want to chop it up, if you want to be part of this social media atmosphere out here, well, you know where to find me. You can find me on X at Jeremy Chuggs. You can follow me on IG at Texans Today CS and on TikTok at Jeremy Chuggs as well. My DMs are always open, so if you have any questions, if you just want to chop it up, you can hit me up on these avenues. I'll always be able to answer y'all's questions. Make sure you give me a follow on these platforms. All right, let's go into the Steelers first. I usually start with the Texans, but I want to start with the Pittsburgh Steelers because one main factor that I'm looking at is TJ Watt. How healthy is he? He played his first game in about a month, Week 18 up against the Baltimore Ravens, and he did have an interception. But if you ask me, looking at him in that game, he didn't have the, impact that we normally see from a TJ Watt in this game, right? Like, it didn't seem like he had the same burst off the edge. It didn't seem like he had that same oomph. And, it makes sense because if you don't know what happened with TJ Watt, he actually punctured his lung during a treatment in facility around the beginning of December. He was doing something called dry needling in the Pittsburgh Steelers, facility with their medical team, and they actually accidentally punctured his lung, and he had to sit out for the majority of December, like leading up into this Week 18 game between the Steelers and the Ravens. And regarding his status going into Week 18, it was still, up in the air, right? Even though TJ Watt did play, these were the reports coming in around the NFL. This from Mike Florio. I'm told that as of right now, it's a long shot Watt will be able to play in Week 18 up against the Ravens. As we know now, he did play. Never say never, but it's an ideal timeline to be fully cleared. The Steelers aren't treating this like a normal injury because it isn't one. And then also, Tom Pelissero reported this. My understanding is Watt is expected to be available for the Steelers' next meaningful game. The only question is that next week against the Ravens or not until the wild card round? Now, that was before they knew that it was a win-or-go-home game up against the Baltimore Ravens, so obviously he suited up. He was able to go in that game. If the Steelers had already clinched, no way TJ Watt would have played that game up against the Baltimore Ravens. And going from lung surgery, yes, he had surgery on his lung on December 12th, to playing 4 weeks later, I mean, it goes without question. This dude is an absolute warrior. Most respect to TJ Watt for putting his body on the line, putting his life on the line for his teammates, for his brothers around him. Don't know if I would have done the same. It's hard to be put in that situation, right? Like, you punctured a lung. And many people online were kind of talking about their experiences with lung punctures and, having lung injuries. And they were like, the fact that he's even practicing a couple weeks after is insane. Everything that I read basically, kind of as a metaphor was like, it kind of feels like you got in a car accident. And going from that to being able to be out on the field and, having one of the major plays in that game, getting the interception, that's huge. And the question now lies is, how healthy is he going up against the Texans? I know he played this past week up against the Ravens, but like I said, besides that interception, which, yes, he made a good play, right? There's nothing. What's the quote about luck, right? It's just hard work, persistence, and then being in the right place at the right time, all bundled up together equals that luck. And it was somewhat lucky that the ball got tipped right into his hands for that interception. But TJ Watt, like I said, I just didn't see the same burst out of him that you normally do. Now, we'll have to see how he is. I guarantee you he suited up against the Ravens. He's going to suit up against the Texans. It's just, how much of an impact will he make in this wild card game. Now, every time I talk about TJ Watt, the name that I think of is his brother JJ Watt. Obviously, one of the best Texans, if not the best Texan to ever do it. And why not have the debate? Because I was having it in the office earlier. Who is the better Watt brother all time? If you think it's TJ, go down and type TJ. If you think it's our boy JJ, go down and type JJ. Let me know. Overall in their careers, who do you think was the better player? I know TJ is still playing. JJ Watt left quite the legacy in the NFL. Let me know down below. Is it TJ or is it JJ? I'll be looking to see what your answer is. For me, I'm obviously going JJ, right? It's JJ Watt. Of course I'm going with JJ Watt. Now, seriously, I think it's fun. These guys, back and forth, they always have that banter, and it's kind of that brother rivalry between the two. And, it's apples and oranges, because I do feel like even though they're both edge rushers, they do kind of play the position different, right? TJ Watt is a 3-4 outside linebacker where he stands up on the edge, will back up into coverage sometimes and kind of is utilized different. JJ Watt was a 3-4 defensive end where he played on the line most of the time with his hand in the dirt outside the tackle, but he would also flip inside, would be lined up over the guards, over the centers. We don't really see that much out of TJ, so I do think even though they're both edge rushers, they do kind of play the position a little bit differently, but of course, I'm biased. I'm a Texans fan. I'm going to go with J.J. Watt. Now, let's look at some other injuries that we got to look out for the Pittsburgh Steelers, because T.J. Watt, obviously, he's not the only one who, even though Mike Tomlin in his press conference earlier this week said they're basically healthy across the board. No major injuries to report, and he doesn't expect anybody to really be out this game. Now, there were some inactives this past week for the Pittsburgh Steelers, Roman Wilson, Kaleb Johnson being two of those. And one more injury that I really want to look out for right here, Deshon Elliot, because he has not been playing with the Pittsburgh Steelers for the better half of this month, right? He has been out for a while, and he's been posting some cryptic messages on IG. Not going to say I got by one of them, but I was going to our Steelers host, Jack Sparrow. I was like, is this guy playing? He said, not so fast. He doesn't think that he's going to be able to play this week. Maybe if the Steelers advance, then he would play in the divisional round. But if Deshon Elliot is able to come back, that's a major piece to this Steelers defense on the back end. And, regarding how healthy he is, that could be a big factor in this Texans-Steelers matchup. Also, Brandin Echols, he was able to return to the Pittsburgh Steelers this past week, played decently up against the Ravens. And then Cam Heyward, he's just a little bit older, dealing with injuries. I know he went down earlier in that game, did not finish the game with the Steelers, but just some injuries just to keep an eye out for during this week. Now, let's look at some Steelers X factors going into this game. We know TJ Watt is, going to be a huge factor for this team, but let's look at some other potential X factors that might not be as known to Texans fans. One that I want to take a look at is Keanu Benton. He is a defensive tackle, nose tackle for this Steelers team, and he specializes in getting after the quarterback. He's an interior pass rusher, 5.5 sacks this year, and if you look at his PFF grades, his highest grades by far are his pass rush grades. He's trying to get after the quarterback every single down, and with the Texans' interior offensive line being kind of in flux, we don't know, who's going to be playing left guard, if it's still going to be Titus Howard or if they're going to bump him out, if it's Jarrett Patterson. I'm definitely going to be a little bit more worried about a Keanu Benton. But, with Cam Heyward, TJ Watt, they get a lot of the, notoriety there in Pittsburgh. But Keanu Benton is somebody that Texans fans should look out for in this game, a really good interior pass rusher for Pittsburgh. Another guy who the Texans fans should look out for, Pat Freiermuth. And mainly because the Texans have kind of gotten burned by tight ends over the past month, right? Leading up to that, Raiders game, Brock Bowers had a good game up against the Houston Texans. The Arizona Cardinals, right? Who was their main offensive weapon? It was Trey McBride. The Los Angeles Chargers. Now, he dropped a couple passes, which ended up really helping out the Houston Texans, one of them being a, tip pass for an interception. But Oronde Gadsden, the Chargers tight end, seemed to get open a ton up against this Texans squad. So Pat Freiermuth, he made some big plays up against the Ravens. that worries me a little bit with this Texans team because the one area of this defense that has struggled, in my opinion, especially the past month, is guarding opponent tight ends. And Pat Freiermuth, he's pretty good. They also have Jonnu Smith. So 2 tight ends that are able to get it done. And, obviously, the guy who's getting them the ball is probably one of the main X factors for this game, right? If Aaron Rodgers plays magnificently, the Steelers have a good chance to win this game. If he plays like crap, they're probably going to lose this game. Their playoff chances, ride or die, with Rodgers. And with his age, getting up there in the 40s, is this going to be his last year? Is he going to extend it one more season after this year? You never know with somebody who is in their 40s playing NFL football. But Rodgers, he is going to be the biggest factor, in my opinion, and probably not a hot take for anybody out there on whether or not the Steelers win or lose this game. Now, coming up, I have some Texans injuries that we got to watch out for. Actually, some good injury news that I heard from my guy Aaron Wilson. Also, some X factors on the Texans side of the ball that we should be looking out for. Before we get into all that, quick word from our sponsor over at PrizePicks. I love PrizePicks. So does my producer Jack, and I know you will too. This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. Whether you're starting a new routine or making player picks for the first time, trying something new can be hard. But in life and on PrizePicks, it always feels good to be right with high-pressure playoff matchups every weekend and elite hoops action almost every night. The action never stops, and PrizePicks lets you take control. Do you miss fantasy football? PrizePicks lets you play fantasy football every week. Pick your favorite players and win when they hit their projections every single week. And on PrizePicks, how you play out is up to you. If you want flexibility, you can choose a flex play where you can get paid even if your picks miss. And if you want the biggest payouts, go for the power play. No matter how you play, PrizePicks is a great way to put your takes to the test. Join the millions of users and sign up for America's #1 fantasy sports app today. Download the PrizePicks app and use code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, it's good to be right. And I was actually scrolling around the PrizePicks app today. And speaking of X factors, I think one X factor in this game could be C.J. Stroud's running ability. The Steelers have a pretty good pass rush, and going back to that wild card game last year, right? The reason why the Texans, I feel like, were really able to get one over on the Chargers. One, obviously the defense played great. They caused 4 turnovers from Justin Herbert. But 2, C.J. Stroud used his legs. And on PrizePicks right now, they have his projection at 11.5 rush yards up against Pittsburgh. So let me know down in the comment section. Do you think Stroud goes more or less than 11.5 rush yards? I want to know what you have to say on this one. Let me know down below. More or less than an 11.5 rush yards. And if you feel super strongly about that, like I said, go get started with PrizePicks today. That information down in the comments and description of today's show. But let me know more or less on Stroud's rush yards projection. Now, let's get to some good news for your Houston Texans. I was talking with Aaron Wilson, and he actually dropped a video on this yesterday on his YouTube channel. If you want to check out more on that, you can definitely go do so. Good friend of the program, Mr. Wilson. But he was talking about Jaylen Reed, and the expectation is that he is going to return this week up against the Steelers. The rookie out of Penn State, the 6th-round pick, was playing magnificently until he injured his forearm. And that put him on IR for the second time this season, and he hasn't played since. In Week 13 is whenever he got injured. And I've been, talking back and forth with some people from Reed's camp, and the expectation and the hope is that he will start up against the Pittsburgh Steelers at safety next to Kalen Bullock. Now, a lot of people were thinking, oh, maybe it's going to be Kayvon Wallace, maybe it'll be this, that, or the other. Well, I broke down in my video yesterday that the Texans actually waived Kayvon Wallace after making Darrell Taylor active off of IR. So, with no Kayvon Wallace, that means it's probably going to be Jaylen Reed expected to be in that position, and then probably maybe a Miles Bryant also stepping in. We'll have to see. I also imagine that the Texans probably re-sign Kayvon Wallace to their practice squad and end up elevating him to the active roster for this game. Another injury and, expected to return. Nothing really to report here. It's Kamari Lassiter. We all knew that he was going to be able to return for this game. They sat him out in Week 18 more to save him from himself, right? Kamari, I think it would take him losing both of his legs to get off of the field. I mean, this dude is an absolute warrior. He does not want to miss any snaps. And the Texans, they know that, so they went ahead and kind of saved him from himself by sitting him out week 18 up against the Colts. But no really shocker here. He is expected to return for this game, this wild card matchup between the Texans and the Steelers. And that's great news because the defense is a million times better whenever you have Kamari Lassiter and Derek Stingley as your top two corners. Now, the biggest question mark and somebody who we will have to be watching closely is Trent Brown. He is going to be the main piece for this Texans offense that I'm not going to say is make or break for this team, but he's going to be a big factor on how this team plays up against the Steelers. If he's in, then this is going to be your starting lineup, the one that we've seen most of the season, right? It's going to be Ariante Ursary at left tackle, Titus Heyward, the former right tackle, now left guard, Jake Andrews at center, Ed Ingram at right guard, and then Trent Brown at right tackle. But if Trent Brown's not able to go, then you see the O-line shuffle. And with TJ Watt, Alex Highsmith, I'm not sure how the Texans and this coaching staff want to go about putting together the offensive line. Because with Trent Brown, if he's not able to go, I think the main X factor for this Texans offense is then Titus Heyward. Because do you put him at right tackle because of TJ Watt, Alex Highsmith, and you're like, okay, he's probably one of the better, pass blocking tackles that we have, if not the best pass blocking tackle we have on this team without Trent Brown there at right tackle? Or do you say, no, we want to run the ball a little bit better, and I think your running game is the best when Titus Heyward is at left guard. I like Jarrett Patterson, but your run game does suffer a lot whenever he's in the game at left guard. Just, my opinion, watching him play, watching this team play, I think you get a lot more power out of that position with Titus Heyward rather than Jarrett Patterson at left guard. So if that's the case, you put Titus Heyward in at left guard and then put Blake Fisher at right tackle. That's where it kind of starts the, what will they do? And big decisions need to be made if Trent Brown isn't able to go. That's why Titus Heyward, in my opinion, biggest X factor for this Texans team on the offensive side of the football if Trent Brown is not able to go for this wild card matchup. Another X factor for this Texans team, Jaylen Noel. And I'm not talking about on the offensive side, even though he probably should be a little bit more, right? He's had some really good plays. That touchdown up against the Chargers in Week 17, absolutely electric. But for this game, a lot of people think it's going to be a low-scoring affair, right? A defensive matchup. The Texans defense, the Steelers defense, both really good in this league. Jaylen Noel can really flip this game on its head if he's able to get one or two massive returns in this game. A punt return, a kick return to get the Texans in great field possession could be the game changer, could be the moment in this game that flips everything in the Texans' favor. And we've seen it before. Jaylen Noel's ability to return the football is fantastic. And him in the punt return game, whenever he has a massive return, that sparks everything for this Texans team. So I'm looking at Jaylen Noel in the return game, especially in a defensive matchup in Pittsburgh. If he can have one massive return in this game, I think that could be the key for the Texans winning up against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, let's look at the defensive side, where I think Henry To'oTo'o could be a massive factor for this Texans defense. As I mentioned, they've had a big struggle guarding opposing tight ends. And what does that mean? Mostly means, the linebacker who's guarding him, probably Henry To'oTo'o or Azeez Al-Shire. And another big factor in this one, which if you watched my Keys to Victory earlier in the week, the Pittsburgh Steelers, the one thing I noticed up against the Ravens that they did constantly, they go to their running back in the flat. Kenny Gainwell, I want to say they threw it to him maybe 8 or 9 times into the flat in that game up against Baltimore. And Henry To'oTo'o has actually been excellent in guarding running backs in the flat. So if you match up Henry To'oTo'o up against the Kenny Gainwell, up against their other running back in Jaylen Warren, I think that could be great for this Texans defense because he's shown that he has a great ability to locate the running back who's trying to escape into the flat or, try to set up a screen and really get a hat on a hat, get a helmet on him, and be able to take him down. Now, we also know Henry To'oTo'o has missed some plays, this year, most notably up against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But I think overall, he's proved himself really good. And he's, been able to prove that one-on-one, man-on-man up against running backs, he's able to cover those guys. So I'm looking at Henry Toto to kind of neutralize a guy in Kenny Gainwell. And obviously a huge factor in this game is C.J. Stroud. There's, I talked about Aaron Rodgers, and obviously it's the same thing with C.J. Stroud, right? I think looking at him and looking at, his ability to not turn over the football, which the Texans, they've done a good job so far this year. I think they're second in the NFL in terms of giveaways this year on offense. They've done much better at protecting the football this season and being able to make big plays. So C.J. Stroud, he is going to be a huge factor in this game. But the main factor for this Texans team comes down to the pass rush. And these two guys in particular, Will Anderson Jr. and Danielle Hunter. Combined 27 sacks on the season, 6 forced fumbled, 6 PBUs between these two guys. If they are on it, which the Steelers, they don't have world beaters at tackle. Now, Aaron Rodgers, he's going to try to get the ball out quick, try to get the ball out of his hands. But if Will Anderson Jr., Danielle Hunter can get after Aaron Rodgers, and I think if combined they have 3 sacks in this game, maybe a forced fumble, that could be the turning point in this game that helps the Texans beat the Pittsburgh Steelers. And a reminder, I will be live for this game. The wild card matchup, Monday Night Football, 8:15 p.m. Eastern Time, 7:15 Central for us Texas folks, where the 12-5 Texans will travel to play the 10-7 Pittsburgh Steelers. I'll be live an hour before kickoff. Don't miss a thing. Make sure, hit me up on social media at Jeremy Chugs, and if you made it to the end of today's video, make sure to hit that subscribe button for free Texans content all year long.